Okay, so we're in the home stretch here. We've got one more talk, and we're going to now focus in on the operations box. And we're going to talk about how operations and the .NET Enterprise servers work together to handle these new kinds of web services. Now, if you think about it, web services and running these things have a little bit different dynamic than the typical software development strategy where you're shipping a packaged product. The deployment process, the scalability requirements, the availability requirements, and the fact that you need to do this on such a regular basis and respond quickly, and that internet loads can change on a very dynamic basis, we're going to need some new capabilities here. So we're going to talk through a couple of key things. In the deployment area, we're going to be talking about partitions and drag and drop .NET deployment. So all the technologies you've seen around the .NET platform are going to enable you to simply take those things and do Xcopy deployment. It's a pretty amazing thing. The servers will take care of automatically registering anything. They'll use the paths to take care of relative operation. You'll get side-by-side capabilities. In terms of scalability, we've enabled scale-out at every level of the N-tier architecture. We've also enabled on-demand scale-out so that as load hits, you can bring additional servers online or offline so that you can balance load between different parts of your application. In terms of high availability, one of the key things that we wanted to be able to do was to be able to measure and take action in response to things like failures in the system or additional load occurring. So deeply throughout the system, the runtime is instrumented. It provides that data in a way that can be acquired and accessed throughout the distributed operation. And finally, we have a set of analytics which allow us to take a look at that data and pull it all together. Now, all these capabilities are available in the .NET Enterprise servers. And here to talk to us about that is Dave Reed. Dave Reed's been working in the enterprise software area for the last 18 years. He was on the MTS team and then ran the COM+ services team. Most recently, Dave has been leading our .NET Enterprise server technologies, and that's what he's here to talk about. And today, he is the general manager for SQL Server and XML technologies. And with that, I'd like to introduce Dave Reed. Welcome.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Thanks. Long day, huh? Well, there certainly was a lot of information today. Just like to point out one key thing that I've learned so far today at PDC 2000, and that is I am getting rid of my Speedo bathing suit. And that's it for jokes from me. We're now going to start talking about running all the stuff that we've been learning about today in terms of the .NET frameworks. Now, John alluded to a set of server products that we've been working on for the last couple of years, and really the focus of this talk is not necessarily on detailed feature descriptions of those products. We have a lot of those sessions tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. What we're going to cover in this talk is going to be very demo-focused talk, and what we're going to cover is, okay, now I've built this stuff, and I'm a developer working on this stuff, but how is it going to run in the data center? How is it going to run in the operations side once I deploy this technology? And that's really the focus of this technology, is running the applications that you built using the .NET frameworks. I want to begin by talking a little bit about our strategy with respect to the .NET Enterprise server products. Our .NET Enterprise server products build on the scalability, reliability, security capabilities, management capabilities in the Windows 2000 server product family. 2 years ago, or a little bit less than 2 years ago, I stood up in a similar in PDC in Denver and talked about COM+ 1.0 technologies, what we refer to as the COM+ services technology, part of the WinDNA programming model in Windows 2000. We shipped that. We shipped that technology in February of this year, And we're quite proud of that technology alongside the other capabilities of Windows 2000. Just to give you a few statistics on Windows 2000, again, we shipped it in February. As of the end of June, we've shipped 3 million copies of Windows 2000. We have also been really excited about the feedback that we've gotten on the support side about how the rollout and upgrade of Windows 2000 is going. This is really, really important to us, and we worked very hard to make sure that there was a smooth upgrade, and we see that all the hard work that we've done seems to be paying off. We've also done a series of benchmarks, external benchmarks on the product, so that we can feel confident that when we go out and say Windows 2000 server products are more reliable, in fact, the most reliable server products that we've ever built, that those are solid facts supported by external benchmarks that have done not only reliability, but also scalability of the operating system. Later this year, we'll be releasing the data center version of Windows 2000, which is an OEM-only version of Windows 2000 that will ship through our hardware partners that will be the most reliable, scalable, scale-up, out solution for Windows 2000. In Bill's keynote tomorrow, he'll be highlighting the roadmap for Windows 2000, so I'm not going to say a lot more about it here, but we'll look forward to that information tomorrow. The .NET Enterprise, the strategy behind our server products is to build a very, very strong, the best platform for running .NET framework applications on. We totally have embraced open standards through the XML, the SOAP protocol, and other standards that you learned about in today's sessions, that you knew about before you came to this, and that you'll learn about in talks throughout the week. That is so that we provide the best interop, that we can easily interop with other systems using the software orchestration technology that Amit just showed us, and other techniques as well. Through Windows 2000 and the .NET servers, we want to provide the world's best platform for running these types of applications on, but that's shouldn't be confused with the fact that we embrace the open standards that we've talked about in this year's PDC. We are hardcore on the standards, but we're also hardcore on building the best platform to run these applications on. So the focus of this talk is really the operational requirements and how we address those requirements surrounding running these modern applications, these modern web-based applications. I'd like to highlight 3 points that I think are really important surrounding these requirements. The first thing I want to say is that a lot of these requirements are not new to some set of people, likely a set of people in the audience and beyond. Those are people who have been running enterprise data centers, and they know about these requirements, and they've been addressing these requirements for years. The thing that has changed is that there is a much broader audience of people that now have to deal with these requirements. Anyone building an internal application, anyone building an internet application, anyone building an ISV out there that's building a hosted application now have to address these new requirements that are imposed on the modern applications. Our focus is to make it much, much simpler to address these requirements through Windows 2000 and through our .NET Enterprise server products. The second thing, and I think this is particularly interesting for this audience, I know that there are a lot of developers out there, and you're probably saying, well, geez, we're talking about operational stuff. I'll just hand that stuff off to those ops guys. We hired those guys out of McDonald's, and they're managing these servers, and whatever happens there, I really don't care. No, that's not the way. That's not the way it works. A lot of you out there know that the whole operations side of things and the development side of things, there's not a really hard line between those two disciplines anymore. As developers, you have to worry about what's going to happen after the software is deployed, much more than you had to in the past, and you need to ensure that the software that you deliver and deploy is going to have all the management capabilities and operational capabilities that we'll talk about in this presentation. Lastly, the development cycle has totally changed. Okay? You get V1 out, and you may kind of approximate kind of a normal development cycle in V1, and then it's just a frenzy after that. There's no like V2 or V3. There's more just continuous deployment of addressing new business needs and business requirements after that. So deployment, scalability, high availability, and analysis. We're going to go into each one of these areas in more detail, but just to give you a heads up of basically what we're going to talk about. Scalability, this is a no-brainer. You have to be able to scale to the maximum capabilities of the platform that you're building on. You make platform choices based on scale. This is just something that has to be addressed, and the global web environment dictates this. We have a view on how you achieve scalability, and we'll talk about that later in the talk. Availability. A site cannot go down, period. A site or an internal app, an ISV app in a hosted environment. I mean, it's just everybody's heard 24 by 7. 24 by 7 is a given. It's not negotiable. It just has to work. Monitoring and analysis. Facilities need to exist that provide data on the health of the overall application. You also need data and analysis tools to understand how the site is being used and to be able to modify the site in real time based on that data. And lastly, deployment. You need to be able to deploy software in a friction-free way, easy deployment on the client, of course. No install, it just deploys. No uninstall, you just delete it. Or it just goes away, you don't even know it, it just times out. On the server, you have to have side-by-side. These are requirements that we're dealing with today and we have to address. So just a little more drill in on the deployment side. First off, developers have to have complete control over how the software is deployed. This means that they need to have a flexible deployment environment where they can stage content, test that content, and then deploy it across your clusters, across your servers to actually go in production. Second, as I said before, you've got to be able to deploy software in a way that allows you to have continuous operation. So I've got version 1 operating. I want to start deploying version 2. I don't want to shut down version 1. I don't want to worry about which machine is installed, etc. I want the software to take care of just rolling out this new version and not interrupting the execution of version 1. We've listened a lot to your comments and feedback on the DLL hell situation. I'm sure a lot of you out there who are COM developers, etc., are familiar with the set of problems that have existed with respect to version conflicts, dependencies, the fact that COM applications and other types of applications may not have all the information, metadata associated with that application, may be stored in various parts across the file system, and the complexities that introduces with install and uninstall, etc. What I want to talk about is some of the things that we've done to address those issues. We've done some things already with the Windows 2000 release that hopefully you're aware of, but just to make sure, I'll talk about it here. We built something called System File Protection, which gives you the protection from preventing system DLLs that are commonly used across applications from being accidentally updated or updated by the act of installing another application or downloading something from the web. So there are a set of DLLs that we know and love that often a new version will come along, break your existing apps. This is now preventable using this feature in Windows 2000. This is a software change that we made that ships with Windows 2000. The second thing is that we've made a lot of process changes in terms of how we deliver our system DLLs. First of all, they ship in a lot less places. They basically just ship in the operating system. There's no more option packs. There's no more this and that pack. It just ships in Windows 2000. For those who had experience with the option pack, I'm sure you were pleasantly surprised when you installed Windows 2000 and everything that you ever needed was in a single install with a single reboot. The second thing is there are no longer feature-packed software service packs. We're just putting bug fixes into service packs. There's not a proliferation of functionality. We have other techniques for addressing content or infrastructure that has to be updated, such as our MS-XML stack, and we do web releases of that technology because that's very fast-moving. But for the hardcore system DLLs that a lot of applications depend on, these ship in very few places, and they do not have new features added in service packs, etc. So again, we listened to your feedback, and we've made a lot of changes we made in Windows 2000, and we believe that this has made a difference. Let's talk about what's next. The first demo of the day is we're going to talk about a new feature that we put into COM Plus that will ship in the next version of Windows 2000. We call this feature application partitions. Now in COM Plus, there is this concept of an application. It has metadata associated with it, and it has components associated with it. You install these things on a machine, now you have an application running. Our customers told us, we want to be able to run side-by-side COM Plus applications for a couple of different reasons. One is, if I have a development and production scenario on the same machine, okay, today we don't do this because it just doesn't work, but I want to make use of my hardware in a more flexible way, so I want to install a development version of this particular application while my production version is running. COM Plus application partitions allow this and enable this scenario. The second scenario is I'm a hosting company and I have 300 different versions of this application that these various customers depend on. This is a real scenario, okay? 300. They all have various bug fixes, they have specialization, etc. And I can't afford to buy 300 different machines to partition from customer to customer. So I'm fine in partition. I want the ability to partition all these various versions of this application on a single machine, and COM Plus application partitions allow this. At this time, I'd like to call out Quentin Clark, who is the product unit manager of Application Center, and he's going to show us COM Plus application partitions.
Thanks, Dave. Good afternoon. The first thing I'd like to show people is COM Plus partitioning, which is a new feature in COM Plus that will be out with the next version of Windows 2000. Wrong screen, folks.
Okay, we're not in the business desk. We're in the Hanson Brothers application. Thank you.
There we go. So the first thing I'd like to do is just log into this application. Hanson Brothers is a sample application which is being run through IIS and using COM Plus applications on the back end to do the object work and transaction work. I'll go ahead and look at a couple of quotes. And the first thing I'd like to show is how these applications are actually running in the COM Plus Explorer. This is the same COM Plus Explorer that you're familiar with, or what used to be in the NT4 days, the MTS Explorer. These would be MTS packages, which are now called COM Plus applications. These applications are in fact running. What you'll notice is different is that I'm not in an applications directory, but instead I'm in an applications node. Instead I'm in a COM Plus partitions node. And this particular application is running in a partition called production partition. Creating a new partition is as easy as right-click, application partition. You can create a new application partition that way. But I've gone ahead and created a test partition, which has the same COM Plus applications as does my production partition. Partitions have applications which are instantiated via the user context, which is instantiating those objects.
So the user identity.
The user identity. Within Active Directory users and computers, you can set which particular users will use any particular COM Plus partition. In this case, with my production partition set, I'm using the user HB_prod, which is the user that IIS uses when accessing those COM Plus applications.
And you can also use Active Directory organizational units there.
That's correct, Dave. The other thing you'll notice, I have a test partition set up, and that user is HB_test. And again, that's the user that IIS will use in a different virtual route to access the applications. To show that, I have another login, which will log me into the different IIS site, which is running this particular application. Oh, whoops. Little demo error there. Let me just restart that. So go ahead and log back in. And now I'm going to go ahead and look at a few more quotes. And back here in the COM Plus Explorer, you'll notice that in my test partition, I'm now running these applications, whereas the activity has timed out in my product partition, therefore demonstrating that these partitions actually are in fact isolated. This is really important to be able to run two different versions of an application. Take, for example, the case where, as Dave talked about, you're trying to get a test version of your application or updates of your application out onto production servers, you want to look at those and test those applications in your real production environment. You'd want to use partitions to do that. It's also useful for cases where you have hosting environments where you have multiple users, you want to segregate the partitions they're running in.
Great. Thanks. So the next thing I want to talk about, if I can get my slides back. Slides, please. Okay. Next thing I'd like to talk about is some of the capabilities that, with respect to deployment, that we put into the .NET framework. What we've done is, at the lowest levels of the framework, we have built in the ability to really do friction-free deployment and side-by-side installations. The way that we did this was to create the notion of completely self-describing software, self-describing components, if you will. This means that if you walk up to a .NET application, all the metadata associated with that application is right there. It's not somewhere else in a registry. It's not in some special file with metadata. It's just right there to be consumed. It's in a simple XML format that's readable and changeable, and it's a great infrastructure to build on top of for other tools that we'll see in a bit. This, again, enables side-by-side deployment, again, the ability to deploy multiple applications that are different versions and have them run simultaneously on the same machine, which also enables the concept of rolling upgrade, where you don't have to interrupt operations just because you're installing a new version. The fact that you now have this self-description format and it's with the actual entities that make up the application, it removes significant complexities in building installation scripts in the act of installing an application onto a machine. So it's great enabling technology. And finally, last but not least, the act of deleting an application is no longer scrounging the machine, trying to figure out where all the different registry settings are and the different metadata lives, etc. It's as simple as just deleting the application. So let's go back to Quentin and take a look at how easy it is to install a .NET framework application.
Great. Thanks, Dave. If we could switch the video back. They're a little slow in the video uptake here, aren't they?
I need to take a walk back there, I think.
Here we go. So here's an application. Well, more accurately, here's not an application. You can see I'm trying to get to an application that's installed on the local host through the web, and I'm getting an ASP plus error saying 404, the application cannot be found because there's no application there. So I'm going to go ahead and install an application through this process of drag and drop. On my left-hand side, I have an empty directory, which is the IIS virtual root for the default application. Now on the right-hand side, I have a folder full of the iBuySpy application code. I'm going to select all and drag and drop this over. Now as that's going, I'm going to go ahead and hit refresh in the browser. And what we'll find is that this application will now come up. This application has not had to go through any registration process or any further installation process. The code, the components, yeah, that's right.
All right.
All the code, components, configuration, and content automatically get recognized and picked up by the new framework system.
Done?
Yep, I'm done.
All right. So that's deployment. Now we're going to move on to scalability. And I have the slide. As I said before in the beginning of the talk, there's just no option in terms of dealing with scalability. You've got to design and architect your applications for maximum scale, and you have to build your configuration, your hardware configuration and software configuration to address scale as well. There are other issues than just thinking about designing for maximum scale, the absolute maximum amount of load that your application is going to take. The other thing to consider is that in certain web scenarios you have large fluctuations in load. This is due to seasonal requirements or worldwide product rollouts, like we just saw with the Harry Potter book, etc. Dealing with this massive fluctuations makes it really inefficient to have just huge hardware sitting there without the flexibility of moving that hardware around. There are two approaches to scale up. Scale up and scale out. There are significant trade-offs in choosing these two approaches. There are trade-offs that exist between all the different tiers, whether it's the web tier or the data tier or the firewall, etc. Our friends at certain hardware companies entice you to buy really, really big machines that cost really, really large amounts of money. We know who they are. We believe that there's a better approach. We believe that scaling out is really the only way of really addressing the largest scalable sites. Yes, in certain tiers, specifically the data tier, scale up works very well, and we invest heavily to make sure that our infrastructure runs in a scale up environment. But we put a lot of emphasis also on scale out. Standard high volume hardware that you can just stack up, stack them and rack them, is the way to address, particularly on the web and application server tiers. Scale up allows you to start small at a low cost and grow linearly in terms of cost model as your scalability requirements increase. Again, starting out your business by purchasing the biggest possible iron that you can afford isn't necessarily a great business model, and also is going to be difficult in terms of how you share resources over time in terms of flexibility as you move that hardware around to address different business problems. In addition to the scalability capabilities of the scale-out architecture, there's also significant benefits in reliability. So the way scale-out typically works, for those who don't know, is you have a cluster of servers and you have some type of load balancing engine front-ending those cluster of servers that decides where to push work. Our application model, both with .NET Framework and with WinDNA, is to support the notion of building stateless servers so that as work comes in, you satisfy a request to a client, and the next time that same client comes in and does a request again, it could be routed to a completely different server with continuation of work and state being maintained on a data tier or some sort of shared state server. If you have a failure in this kind of architecture, the next time work comes in, you're not going to route it to the failed server because the load balancer knows that, so you route it to a server that is currently executing properly. And these load balancing engines like NLB and COM+ load balancing CLB that we'll talk about in a minute know when a server is executing and when it's also in a failed state to ensure that work is never routed to a failed server. There are lots of options in terms of scale out that you see from our hardware partners. The notion of a pizza box, you just stack them up. They're very efficient in terms of power consumption. They're very efficient in terms of space utilization. And they're very easy to manage from some of the tools that we'll be introducing in a few minutes. You can check out a lot of these configurations if you just go over to the trade show floor. I want to talk for a minute about SQL Server in terms of scale. In terms of scale up, this is the default way that you typically scale a data tier, mostly because the technology hasn't been there to really allow you to scale out. So the default is, for your data tier, you typically buy one or more servers depending on your failover capabilities, and you just scale these things to the maximum. And we invest heavily in the SQL Server team and in the Windows 2000 team to ensure that the scalability is there in terms of a scale-up approach. In SQL Server 2000, which we'll be delivering later this year, we have support for very large memory, 64 gig memory support for a large number of CPUs. Some of our hardware partners are beginning to build machines that are 16 and 32 CPU capable. And we've ensured that the software that we are building is linear, that will scale linearly to the number of CPUs that are in the machine. And we work with those partners building those very large boxes to ensure that we get great performance out of that type of environment. And of course, this is all built on top of the Windows 2000 data center release that is coming out later this year. Tomorrow, you'll learn more about our plans for 64-bit support. When 64-bit support becomes available from our hardware partners and in Windows 2000, SQL Server will take advantage of 64-bit support. So that's scale up, and it's very, very important for the data tier to be able to adequately scale up, and SQL Server 2000 supports that. The innovation in the SQL 2000, besides the innovations I just talked about in scale up, is the ability to partition your data in scale out. We're releasing a new feature in SQL 2000 that we call distributed partition views DPVs, and this is the ability to partition your data across a set of servers and have the query processor have a unified view across those set of servers so that when you do a query, the infrastructure in SQL 2000 knows how to direct it to the correct server. You obviously don't have to target that in your code. So this is significant innovation and is our first step in scaling out the data tier using SQL Server 2000, really giving you the next step in terms of web-type scalability in the data tier. There's also other innovation in terms of scale out, the ability to partition your OLAP cubes in a scaled out fashion, some backup technology, and taking advantage of SAN, system area networks, which provide very high performance machine-to-machine communication and really work very, very well in a scale-out environment. So we've done a lot of innovation in the data tier. The DPVs and the other work that we've done in data warehousing really bring the data tier to two new levels of scale that were not possible even with the biggest iron that you would buy in a scale-up approach. For a long time, we have believed that the scale-out approach, particularly on the web and application server or component server tiers, is the way that you achieve maximum scalability. We wanted to make that whole experience easier and more capable from the masses of people that are trying to deal with these types of issues. We're introducing a product this year that actually Quentin Clark is leading, which we call Application Center. And what Application Center provides is it enables scale out for the web and component tiers in the easiest way possible. So we provide a lot of management and operation and infrastructure facilities to make scale out of your web and application server tiers as easy as possible. You'll find in your registration packet that you'll have something called the Application Center Beta 1 CD. And I just want to make it feel special for a moment because you're the first people to get the Application Center Beta 1 CD broadly. This is a release that we did special for the PDC, and I encourage you to take a look at that release. Before we jump into a demonstration of a lot of the features in Application Center, I want to just highlight another product that we're not showing here in the demo, and this is the Internet and Security and Acceleration Server, the ISA server, which is also a .NET Enterprise server that will be shipping later this year. This offers significant benefits in both web caching and firewall management, and like our other server products, also gives you the ability to scale out in a firewall environment and also a web caching environment. And you're also getting the Beta 3 in your registration packet of ISA server. I encourage you to take a look at that. It's the final beta of the product and will be shipping later this year. So what I'd like to do now is to go back to Quentin and let's take a look at some of the features in terms of scalability inside of Application Center.
Great. The first thing I'd like to show you is an Application Center cluster. This is the Application Center MMC Snap-in, and it's connected to a 2-node cluster I have called IBS cluster. You can see there are 2 machines running in this cluster, and the goals of Application Center are to provide scalability, availability management, and deployment. Let me start with deployment by looking at what an application is. Application Center introduces the idea of a complete web application or an Application Center application. In this case, I have a sample application created that has all the resources I need in order to fully run that Application Center application. I have a COM+ application, a DSN entry, a collection of files, a website, and some registry keys that help define everything that is this complete application. This application image is something that's fully deployable, and in fact, inside clusters, deployment is automatic, and it keeps all the machines in the cluster running to a single system or single application image so that all the applications across the cluster are all identical. The other way you can do deployment is through point-to-point, which allows you to do scenarios through lifecycle, like development to task, test to pre-production or staging, and staging to production. It also allows you to set up a staging server that can deploy applications to multiple clusters to achieve the very highest levels of scalability. Deploying applications point-to-point, or even within the cluster, is as easy as running a deployment wizard. Here it asks me a couple of questions. One, what I want to call the deployment job, and the other is, do I want to deploy content and applications within the cluster or outside of this particular machine? In this case, I'm going to show deploying outside this machine. The next step in the wizard is going to ask for some credentials. And then it's going to ask me to identify the server I want to deploy this content to. So I'm going to go ahead and add one of the servers in my PDC machines. And then it asks me whether I want to deploy all the applications on this cluster that are defined, or if I only want to deploy a particular application. In this case, I'm going to select my PDC application. And the last set of questions it asks are about, do I want to replicate all the ACLs on the NTFS files? Do I want to replicate all the COM+ applications? And do I want to replicate the ISAPI filters? The reason it asks the last two questions is because it will, in fact, cycle the IIS services in order to ensure that it can install those applications. And that's the last step. Once that's completed, the deployment will, in fact, start. What I want to turn my attention to now is the iBuySpy application, which is actually running on my 2-node application center cluster I showed before. Here you can see it's the standard application we've been showing all day long, but it's being load balanced between the two machines in that cluster. In order to demonstrate this thoroughly, I'd like to update the default ASPX page in order to show which server is actually handling that specific request. So again, it's just a matter of dragging and dropping. I have a UNC share over to the cluster controller, which is the definitive resource for the content configuration components for an entire cluster. Go ahead and copy that over. Yes, I'd like to replace the current version. When I go into the Application Center UI, you can see that a deployment job will be running because it will automatically recognize that new content is there and deploy that out. The other way you can ensure that replication occurs is you can right-click on a machine and say, deploy applications or synchronize this member now, which is useful for situations where if you have corrupt content or some other problem with a server. Back in my application, I'm going to hit refresh, and you'll see it says server PDC-AC1. That's telling me that PDC-AC1 is the machine name that this particular request was served out of. As I hit refresh, you'll see that it changes. Now it's on AC2. So load balancing is occurring between two machines, completely transparent to users. Now I'm going to step things up a bit. I'm going to launch some stress against this cluster. What it's going to do, it's going to start to send HTTP requests to the virtual IP address that that cluster is representing, serving out this single application. As you can see, my application's still working, no problem. Back in the MMC snap-in for the cluster, you'll see performance counters in this performance chart, and they will start to update and show the increased load that's being generated by this load generator. I have two counters here. One is processor utilization, and that's the average processor utilization on every machine across the cluster, averaged together and shown in one chart. The other thing I have here, the other counter I have here, is ASP plus requests per second, and that's showing me the total number of requests per second that this cluster is handling. And you can see in the very right-hand side of the chart that my load has increased. I'm seeing more ASP requests per second across the cluster, and I'm seeing a higher CPU utilization on the machines in the cluster. It looks like we're at about 90% CPU utilization on the cluster. Looks like I should add more headroom to this cluster. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start a task to add a cluster member. It's going to ask me for a server name, in this case PDC AC3, and for some user credentials. And then it's going to examine that new machine and ensure that it's compatible with the rest of the machines in the cluster so it can properly set up load balancing properties and other properties of the cluster. At this point, it's going to go and it's going to set that machine up configuration-wise. Then it's going to deploy all the applications that cluster is serving to that new member of the cluster, and then set up some monitors that will tell the cluster whether or not the machine's ready to start servicing load or not. While it's finishing this up, we'll take a couple of minutes. Let's recap, pause and recap what we've shown.
All right, let's go back to the slides. Slides, please. Thank you. So let's highlight some of the features that you're going to see when you install the Application Center Beta 1 disk. First of all, in terms of scalability, we've innovated and built on top of our vision of shared nothing clustering. Okay? Today in Windows 2000, we ship a technology called network load balancing, and we integrate with this technology in Application Center as our load balancing engine on the web tier. We also support third-party load balancing engines, and those integrate directly in Application Center as well. On the application server tier or component tier, We support COM plus load balancing in Application Center through a technology that we call component load balancing, or CLB. This architecture is a router architecture, which could also be failed over, so you could have a set of router machines that will load balance across a set of component COM plus servers and choose the server that has the lowest CPU utilization and direct workload to that capability. So you basically have an architecture where you have NLB or some other type of web load balancing engine on the front end, load balancing to web servers, and then in the middle tier or component server tier, you're using CLB to load balance across a set of COM plus application servers. The way people typically set these up is you have NLB front end, and then each web server itself is a router, and then just simply load balances across a set of component tiers. There's a variety of ways that you can set things up, and flexibility is there, and integration is there in Application Center. Also, as you saw in the demonstration that Quentin is doing over here, is that it's just a couple of mouse clicks and you can bring a new server online and all the appropriate settings, etc., happen for setting up that server in the load balanced environment. Second, there's a unified way of describing an application image so that you can then manipulate that application across a set of machines. In other words, replicate that application. There's a variety, there's flexibility in how you do that. You can have incremental replication, or you could do more staged replication where you take down half the cluster, you upgrade the application, you bring workload onto the new thing, you take down the other half, you upgrade it, and this is a way of doing a rolling upgrade style of complete end-to-end upgrade of an application across a set of clusters. We saw earlier when we were doing drag and drop type installs, and you're probably wondering, well, how does that technology relate to what you're talking about here with deployment and replication? The technology in the .NET framework is an enabler for making the technology that ships in a product like Application Center even stronger. First, it simplifies a lot of the work that you have to do in terms of replicating it across a cluster. So it fits into a higher level framework like provided in Application Center and does that in a robust and reliable way, much more robust and reliable than dealing with the past with registry settings, etc. The second thing is that a product like Application Center ties together a lot of different entities, not just the entities associated with the .NET application, and brings that all together so that you can do consistent replication across. It's more of an enterprise ready tool associated with large-scale applications that consist with entities outside the .NET framework, outside the Windows DNA framework. Third, there's sophisticated eventing and monitoring technologies that allow you to understand the health of your application and respond appropriately to situations where hardware has gone down, there's a memory leak or some other type of situation, to be able to do that in a cost-effective way, in an efficient, very fast way. And finally, all this technology is rolled up through a unified management console. The console that we're seeing in the demonstration that Quentin is doing is our MMC console. There's also a web-enabled console that allows operators, when they get paged by Application Center that a server went down, they can quickly get in through the web and understand some monitoring information about what's happening in their cluster. So let's go back and take a look at what happened after we added that machine.
Thanks. Here you can see the CPU utilization. You can see a little Bart Simpson head at the top there. That Bart Simpson head was where I had the 2-node cluster already peaked out. And then where it dropped is where I added that third machine. So the average CPU utilization was reduced when I added that third machine, thereby showing on-demand scalability of applications. The ASP plus requests per second for the cluster hasn't changed, so I've had a constant load that's been about 50 million hits per day ballpark, which is huge scale. And that hasn't changed significantly because we've been maximizing the network throughput. So what we've shown is Application Center, with its clustering technology, allows very high scalability and on-demand scalability without affecting the runtime of the application as your users see it.
Great, thanks. High availability. It's another thing we talk about when we're building web applications or building new style applications. Again, these concepts are not new to a lot of people that have been running data centers, etc., in the enterprise that need to achieve 24/7 reliability. These concepts are not new, but what is new is that a lot more people have to deal with this as developers, as operators, etc. And our focus is to enable this for the masses, and that's what we're doing with technologies and products like Application Center. In terms of thinking about reliability and availability, it's really a combination of having a reliable platform, a reliable application architecture, so things like shared nothing, etc., designing for failure, fail fast, a variety of techniques that you use in design that you're going to learn about in a lot of the sessions at the PDC, and also operational practices, platform architecture and practices really define how you're going to determine the availability of your systems, whether it's 2 nines, 3 nines, 4 nines, 5 nines, etc., things that hardware vendors like to talk about. All parts of the system contribute to the overall reliability of your application. So there's parts include load balancing engines, application servers, web servers, your database server, your messaging system, your ERP application, your custom application. All of these things are now interconnected in the new style application, and you need to have some understanding of the health of all of these parts to tie it together. It's challenging today, due to multiple instrumentation formats, etc., to be able to tie all this information together. There may be information that's coming out of a certain piece of infrastructure or an application that you wrote, but there also may be this black box technology, you're not really sure what it does, but it's a critical part of your system, and it doesn't generate any monitoring data for you. These are issues that we have to deal with today, and issues that we are solving. We've already mentioned a bunch of technologies and techniques associated with scalability, etc., and I just want to call these out before I talk about some of our monitoring management infrastructure that's in Windows 2000. First is the ability to scale out in a shared nothing way. This has a dramatic impact on reliability. When you see reliability numbers published for operating systems, etc., they're typically a single node that has workload put on it, and you're trying to get that single node to fail. As you scale out and add redundancy, you're going to get significant increases in reliability and the number of nines in terms of 99.99% availability of this particular cluster. You get significant benefit that way. Availability is also associated with planned downtime. Planned downtime is unacceptable, so the work that we're doing to support things like continuous deployment and rolling upgrades does have an impact, obviously, on your overall availability of the system. Finally, there's technology in the .NET framework that we call ASP plus resilient state, session state, and this is some new technology that we built to handle session state in a reliable way in light of machine failures. So you have the capability of storing session state associated with your web session on a dedicated session state server box, or you can go directly to a database. And what this gives you is the capability of, in the light of a specific failure, your session state is not going to fail along with that machine because it's being managed elsewhere. What I'd now like to do is to talk for a minute about WMI. WMI is a service that ships in Windows that we depend on heavily in products like Application Center. It's a provider-consumer model for management, instrumentation, and control. So I'm not talking about just data, but also the ability to manage and control this infrastructure. It defines an extensible discoverable schema, which is called SIM, which is the Common Information Model. So this schema provides a standardized way of talking about things like disk, memory, and other entities associated with computing, but also is extensible so that you can define schema that's associated with the operational characteristics of your application. This is an industry standard which is referred to as WEBM. It contains the wire protocol, the Common Information Model, etc., and it's handled by the DMTF, which stands for the Distributed Management Task Force. Again, it's an official standard. You can go to www.dmtf.org, and the people who participate in this standard are hardware vendors, management tool vendors, and operating system vendors. So this is a significant step to enabling the infrastructure, hardware, operating systems, etc., to be managed in a coherent way with lots of data generated so that you can have a rolled up view of the overall health of your machine, your cluster, your application, etc. Application Center builds on top of that by introducing a new technology called HealthMon, and this will ship for the first time in Application Center when we ship later this year. Health Monitor consumes WMI data and then looks for certain thresholds to be exceeded that are defined either by technologies like Application Center, or you as an operator or program can go in and create your own thresholds and actions that take place on those thresholds. So if a threshold triggers, then an action will take place, such as sending an email, logging something to a text file or some other event log, running a general executable that you've written, or a script. So you can envision a scenario where a specific machine is being monitored through WMI to take a look at memory consumption, and HealthMon suddenly sees that memory consumption is say 98% was the threshold of your memory, as your virtual memory is consumed, and you're about to run out of memory. So you need to send an email to an operator or a developer to address that situation because there appears to be a memory leak on the machine, and oh, by the way, you're going to take that machine offline as well. All those capabilities are done through this HealthMon technology, and again, Application Center ships a lot of thresholds and actions that we think are important in running a data center or a clustered environment running a large application, but also you as a developer or operator can also target this technology, maybe by you've exposed some WMI data in your application, and you're going to use HealthMon to look for certain conditions that might be met in that application that suggests that that application is about to fault and you need to take the necessary actions. Lastly, Health Monitor is itself a WMI provider, so application-specific monitoring information can come out of HealthMon, which is specific to an application, and then be consumed by some other WMI consumer. So what I'd now like to do is go back to Quentin, and let's take a look at some of the availability capabilities in Application Center.
Great. What I'm going to show is three aspects of availability. First is session availability. The second is cluster management through events. And the third is automated failure detection and actions based on those failures. Back to my iBuySpy application, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add some things to my shopping cart. For example, the eavesdrop detector, which I'm a big fan of. And you can see my shopping cart now has one item in it. And as I refresh the browser, I might go against a different server. Just a second here. I need to wait for the load balancing to trigger off. And you'll see that my shopping cart is still intact, even though I'm being served from a different server. I can even go and I can take this machine offline by going in the Application Center interface and taking the machine offline. And you'll notice that it asks me whether I want to take the machine offline immediately or whether I want to drain the machine for some period of time. Draining is the concept that a machine can be taken off after a period of time to allow current sessions to finish up what they're doing without being lost. Back in the browser, I'll hit refresh, and you'll see that I'm going to get load balanced to a different machine since the AC3 is offline, and my shopping cart will in fact be intact. Although I'm not sure why the browser is taking so long. Let's try that again. Well, we'll move along. One of the important things about the new .NET frameworks is the rich tracing and instrumentation they've done in the programming model itself. I can go and I can view details of every interaction with the web service and figure out things like the history of how the command was executed, headers, server variables, cookies, etc. This really helps out with debugging, diagnostics, performance tuning, and other diagnostic needs you would have. In the final version of the .NET frameworks, these events will be very tightly integrated with other eventing systems so that products like Application Center can fully manage and understand the availability of .NET Frameworks applications. What I'm going to show now is Application Center events, which are aggregated across an entire cluster from a variety of sources. There are events from the NT event log, from Application Center events, and from the monitoring failures that occur are all aggregated into one UI across all the machines in the cluster. And here you can see I have events from PDC AC3 and PDC AC1, showing them, in fact, I'm aggregating all these events across many machines. The other aspect I want to show is failure detection and taking actions. Let's assume for this demo, I've implemented a feature in iBuySpy that when you complete an order, it sends a piece of mail to the person that made the order, letting them know that the order was taken. That feature depends on the SNTP service running, and I've set up a monitor here in HealthMon which will watch the SNTP service to fail, and if it does fail, it'll automatically restart that service and send a piece of mail to an admin letting them know that that action has occurred. On the machine, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop that service. And you'll see back here in the MMC snap-in, HealthMon immediately recognizes the service has failed, and we'll see it immediately come back online because there's an action wired up that will automatically restart that service. And back here in my service manager, when I refresh this, you'll see that, in fact, the SNTP service has been restarted. Like Dave said, HealthMon works from WMI, and there are a variety of places where it can examine application health data. And I created any new data collector, and I can get that from a WMI event query, which will take from any WMI provider, or there's some built-in help to give you availability data around HTTP requests or COM+ 1.0 applications or any standard Windows 2000 performance monitor. The other thing I want to show was that mail was actually sent to me when that automated failure detection and correction took place. It says here, application center has detected a mail service failure and has automatically restarted the SNTP server. What we've shown is that with Application Center 2000, WMI, HealthMon, and the rich instrumentation as part of the new .NET Framework's application model, you'll be able to achieve a very high level of availability that with ease it's never before been possible.
Great.
Thanks, Dave.
Good job. So we've seen deployment, we've seen scalability, we've seen availability. What I now want to do is shift the focus to, it's a little bit different than what I've talked about so far in terms of hardcore operations. What I now want to do is talk about how we address rapidly changing requirements in business applications. I mentioned earlier releasing the Harry Potter book. What type of things did bn.com have to do to their site to prepare for that release, and what kind of development cycle did they have to go through? When airline fares change radically in the airline industry, what does myairline.com have to do to modify their site to react and respond to those prices? Because you expect up-to-date business changes to take place when you visit these sites, and you need to be able to do this in as efficient way as possible. These new generation e-business sites require continuous modification. People expect highly personalized experience in these sites. They understand when the last time they visit, they understand what products they purchased, etc., and they expect a personalized experience. But I'm not just talking about .coms here. What is it like to visit your 401k site? How personalized is it? What does it know about you, and what kind of experience does it give you when you go there? What is it like when you log into your bank account? Do you have an understanding of the various promotions that might be important to you as you log into that site that's specifically tailored to your specific needs in terms of banking on this site? What is it like to log in to your particular airline? Does it have an understanding of your most frequently traveled routes, etc., so that it can offer you a personalized experience? All this type of personalization requires constant tuning and modification that obviously is performed by developers, but also needs to be performed by the business analyst that may not necessarily have development skills in terms of dumping out new ASP pages or ASP Plus pages or new COM components, etc. You need to be able to modify these sites and tailor these sites without having to go and write code, and most importantly, without having to go through another development cycle where you have to test this change and roll it out, thus delaying your strategic advantage because you're trying to get this new promotion out. You need to be able to do this quickly and efficiently. As I alluded to earlier, when you're building these style of applications, you're in a continuous state of deployment. Secondly, for being able to address this level of personalization in these new style applications, You need to be able to look at a very large amount of data and study how particular users have used your particular application, to be able to utilize that data so that you can more effectively personalize that site based on previous usage, whether it be which pages were visited, which services and products were bought, and other types of buying patterns, etc. But again, it's not just about selling products, it's about offering an experience if you're dealing with a service online, whether it's outside the firewall or inside the firewall. Our solution to this is basically all the technology we've talked about so far, including the .NET framework, but also products that have specific function that are shipping this year, both SQL Server 2000 and Commerce Server 2000. SQL Server 2000 is an important piece in this puzzle in terms of its capabilities in being able to analyze very large amounts of data. Literally 20, 30, 40 million user type data sets are now capable in the SQL 2000 analysis servers that allow you to look at very large amounts of data and see trends and buying patterns, etc. Secondly, we have a new release coming out this year, what we used to call Site Server Commerce Edition. We're shipping this year, Commerce Server 2000. You'll be getting a copy of Beta 1 of Commerce Server 2000. After the conference, it will be mailed to you. And this is a product that's focusing specifically on building e-business applications and provides a lot of out-of-the-box functionality that are tailored specifically to that style of application. It also includes a lot of capabilities in terms of how you personalize an application and a variety of runtimes that do things like targeting and campaign management, etc. It also ties in to the .NET framework and WinDNA programming models today by tying in to the ASP programming model and the ASP Plus programming model tomorrow that allows you to do dynamic content layout and manipulation based on personalization information. So when a specific user logs into a site, you'll then see specific content, and you're doing this without a development cycle. And obviously, it's very dynamic because it's specific to individual users that have profiles that are on your site. At this time, I'd like to call out LJ Germinario, and she's going to give us a demonstration of SQL Server 2000 and Commerce Server 2000 capabilities in terms of analysis.
Thanks, Dave.
All right.
So what we're going to talk about this morning is how you can use Commerce Server 2000 and SQL Server as a tool for analyzing business on an e-commerce site. What I'm showing you here is the business desk, which is a part of the Commerce Server 2000 product. On the right side here, we see our action pane, and on the left-hand side, we have our service modules. Things like analysis, auctions, campaigns, catalogs, orders, and users. Developers or business users could then use this tool as an administrative point into different parts of a site. So let's go in here and look at some of the reports that we have available. Out of the box, right now we have 43 reports. Let's go here and look at one. Let's take a look at ad reach and frequency per advertising campaign. We're going to run the report, and as you'll see, it opens up a browser window. This is made possible using OLAP technology as well as the Office web controls. So whether I'm a business manager using my laptop in the airport or sitting at home, I have access to the data right from my e-commerce site. From this browser screen, I could actually go in and chart the data that I'm looking at. I could then change this from a bar cluster to any other kind of cluster that I'm looking at. I can bring up the different fields that are available, have the ability to drag and drop different fields onto the pivot table, and the data changes dynamically. Now, if I wanted to drill down a little bit further into the data, I could expand the different advertising campaigns that we had. And as you see, the data changes dynamically depending on the data that we're looking at. So let's go back and actually change this a little bit. Right now we're looking at all of the campaigns, but let's take out the worldwide retail campaign. You see that all of the numbers are updated. The pie chart is then changed, and we have real live data. Now all of this data is actually pulled from the Commerce Data Warehouse, which is another part of the Commerce Server 2000 products. And it's all updated real time so that a business manager, marketing manager, whatever, whoever's looking at it could actually change the data and then respond to these results right from their web browser. So let's take this one step further. We have a partner called Visual Insights, who actually does visual reporting based on Commerce Server 2000. As you can see, their module is integrated directly into the Commerce Business Desk. So we allow ISVs and partners and even customers to create custom modules for the Business Desk using a tool in the SDK. Here are some of the reports that we have available. So we're going to bring up custom sales analysis, run that report. Again, it opens up everything right in the web browser. And while this is pulling the dynamic data, you're going to see that we actually have very visual tools that we can look at. In the left-hand corner, we are able to see revenue by product, revenue by customer orders, and then an entire look here showing the products, the customer orders, and then actually the total revenue on the z-axis here, giving us an entire look at the picture from an analysis standpoint, all in our web browser. If we hover over one of the bars, we're able to see real-time statistics. So we can see here that this user actually accounts for 9% of the total revenue of this actual site. Now let's drill down a little bit further, and I can use the lasso tool right here in my browser to select my top tier customers. Let's select just a few more so you can see. The data that's not selected is actually grayed out. So I made a selection here in the revenue by customer orders, but that data's changed up here as well. So we can see what's not included in our view. So now I can go and I can exclude that data, and all of the charts are automatically updated. Let's take a look at the revenue per customer order and actually sort that based on the size. We see here that Steve B is actually one of our top spenders. So if we double click on Steve B, we can see that he buys hardware, a little bit of software, but right here we have the primary item that he's purchasing, which accounts for 10% of the total revenue. We can then see in the view on the right-hand side which data that is, and again, we have the z-axis coordinating that data to give us the full integrated look at what's happening on our site itself. So let's back out of this real quick. What we can do then is once we have this information about our users, we can respond immediately on our website. Let's create a campaign targeting these users. We've identified our top tier users by using the lasso tool. Now let's create a campaign list. And we're going to include only the selected items that we have from our view and save that. Now in the background, it's actually creating a list of all of these users and saving it so that I can use that in the campaign manager in the business desk. So let's pop back here, close the service modules, and open up campaigns. I can use the campaign manager tool to actually create a campaign to target these big spenders. Now here we have the DNA Your Business site, which is a sample site that I'm going to show in a couple seconds. We have a reward set up for our big spenders, and I'm going to show you exactly how you can change this and modify this to interact with your customers in a different way. So once this loads, you'll be able to see that we can not only target them based on different campaign lists that we have in Commerce Server 2000, you'll also be able to target them with different promotions, say 50% off, 20% off, maybe free shipping, whatever that might be. You have the ability here to change the start and end date, which for campaigns and marketing is extremely important. We have this campaign currently set up to run until the 15th. It's an active campaign. We can define our definition, going into the different modules, maybe define if they have to buy a specific product in order to get this discount. In this case, we're not going to make that be the case. What award are they actually getting? Are they getting free shipping? Are they getting a specific giveaway product? You have some different options there. The offer. In this case, we're offering our big spenders 50% off their next purchase at the store. So that if I log in and I'm identified as a big spender, all of my items will automatically receive the 50% discount. Here we see that the big spender list is automatically added over to the expressions, so that this campaign is going to be run on the big spenders list. And then if we jump down to the bottom, we can see the actual display that the customer is going to see. We have an exposure limit, which is actually very important for e-commerce sites. When advertisers are buying time on e-commerce sites, they maybe want to buy a certain number of impressions or exposures to users. You could limit that there. Okay? A basket display. When I add an item to my basket and I'm a big spender, is there a specific message that's displayed to me? The type of content that's actually provided. Is it a button? Is it a banner ad? Whatever that might be. And then some images. here we have the big spender image that I've created. I've identified it here with the URL, and then I've provided some text. And this text will be presented to the user so that when they log into the site, they'll know that they're receiving this discount. So what I have here is a sample site that was built using the Commerce Server 2000 retail solution site. It's called DNAyourbusiness.com. You have the ability to go through and actually shop just like any other e-commerce site. We can go through here, add something to our basket. And once I've added it to my basket, I want to be able to identify myself. So I'm going to log in, and since Steve B was one of our big spenders, I'm going to log in as Steve so we can see the discounts. Immediately on the invoice, we see that there's a message indicating that all items are now half price for our valued customers. If we go back to the home page, we're going to see that it's been catered to Steve B. You see that not only is he presented with a custom message, but also the banner advertisements on the site have changed, reflecting the 50% off. So using Commerce Server and SQL Server 2000, we're able to interact real time with our customers, create campaigns, and hopefully drive revenue, all from the web browser.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Dave.
Slides, please. Well, I want to start by thanking everybody for really sticking this out. This is we've had a great day, giving you a lot of information, and it's almost 6 o'clock, and it's an incredibly long day that started at 8:15 this morning, and I want to personally thank you for sticking out and listening to the information that we've given you on the .NET Enterprise servers in the Windows 2000. The .NET servers make it possible for the abilities. I hope that we've shown you some of those capabilities in our talk today. Capabilities associated with availability, scalability, the ability to deploy in a continuous fashion, etc. These capabilities will be exposed when we ship these products this year for our WinDNA technologies that exist in Windows 2000. The other important note, and an extremely important note, is that these products will also support the .NET Framework technologies that will ship next year and the technologies that you have in your registration kit. The way I like to think of this is that when you're building .NET Framework applications, you're basically going to be hitting the ground running. There's going to be all this great stuff that makes it scale, that makes it more available, that makes it more manageable, that allows you to deploy in a large environment, etc. So all the things that we've learned in the past 5 years of building things like MTS, etc., and all the energy that we've put into that in terms of building these .NET Enterprise servers to make things more available, etc., all the things that I've said, that is also going to apply to the .NET Framework. So my call to action for you is to remember that you have these CDs in your registration kit. The Application Center 2000 product, very, very important scale-out management tool. This is the first beta. We made it for you. Check it out. BizTalk Server. We saw Amit give his great presentation and his great demonstration of the software orchestration and the XML technologies that are associated with that. We made a special beta for you. It has the software orchestration. It's the first time that we've delivered this in a public way. Check this out. ISA Server is the third and final beta of the product. It's going to ship soon. Check it out. We made a CD that has a lot of the presentations that we gave at TechEd, 25 presentations to be exact. We put it all on streaming media. It's on the CD. Check it out. And finally, our host integration server, which is the ability to tie into host systems in an integrated way. We ship this formerly known as SNA server. We call it Host Integration Server now. We have the final release candidate. We gave it to you. Check it out. This is the thing you're all lusting after. This is the PDC Professional Conference Tech Preview CDs that has a lot of the .NET Framework stuff. In addition to the .NET Framework stuff, we have Windows 2000 server on here, and we also have Microsoft SQL Server 2000 Beta 2. So check that out. And last but not least, I promised my dear friend Don Box that I would make a shameless plug for his Enabling XML, or Essential XML. We all love his Essential Com book, that we virtually all have in this audience. So check this book out. Apparently it's 20% off, etc. So again, it's 6 o'clock. I really appreciate you sticking it out with me today. I've had a good time, and I've hoped you've heard a lot. Thank you.
All right. Okay, you did it. Congratulations. You just made it through 10,000 man-years of new technology development. Long day. So what do you think? So I just want to spend 2 seconds reviewing what we saw. Your web application is going to be talking through open protocols to services, to the enterprise servers, to the building block services that Microsoft produces, to web services that everybody in this audience might produce, to the end user clients, everything from cell phones to PDAs, to the richest possible clients, to offline, to other services that may be using your application. We're going to have a platform that enables this with a consistent programming model, a deep operations platform and orchestration to pull it all together. And finally, we've got a great set of tools that makes it all happen. So, a couple quick calls to actions. What do we want you to do? We want you to go try this stuff out. Go build these web services. So you can go try it out in the hands-on lab. But we also have these things available to you. Now, they're in pre-beta form. And because they're in pre-beta form, we want you to play with them. We want you to tell us what we need to fix. We need to get these things to be right for you so that you can ship great products on top of them. There's a lot of things to go take a look at. The iBuySpy site, the FM Expense site, Vista Travel are great examples. So we have a special PDC area for all of you to give us feedback. I don't know what this stands for, but if you go to dapdweb.microsoft.com, vstudio/beta, there's an area for you to give us feedback. It's incredibly important that we get that feedback. And you're automatically going to get the beta of this software by the fall time frame. Finally, there's a whole bunch of new third-party languages and tools. We'd love you to take a look at those things. They're in the exhibit hall tonight, right after this, as well as tomorrow and Thursday from 11 to 2:30. Come talk to us. Tell us what you like, what you don't like. Argue with us about this stuff. We really do take your feedback, and that's one of the main reasons that we have the PDCs, is to talk to you, tell us what you like. It's incredibly important. So there's a couple of great talks that you should go to. The .NET Framework Architecture and Overview. Brian Harry, who's the general manager for the .NET Framework, he was the development manager, now the general manager. He can just go incredibly deep on this thing. Any questions you have, Brian can go there. The .NET Framework, a COM developer's perspective. If you've been doing COM and you want to understand how this stuff's all going to fit together, great talk. Introduction to Active Server Pages, all that stuff Mark Anders did this morning. Take a look. We're going to go deep on it. You can see how you can build very sophisticated web applications. Building and using web services with ASP, another great talk. The ADO and XML talk is going to talk about how to use XML and the relational model to do a distributed, disconnected data model, and how that all integrates into our framework. The BizTalk server talk, going through in detail the orchestration technologies. The introduction to C++, the C# talk. Anders Heilsberg, who is up here talking about our frameworks, is going to go deep on the language and talk about the design principles. Developer productivity features in VS.NET. If you like the tool and you want to learn more about it, this is the place to go. And finally, what's new in Visual Basic.NET? Chris Dias is going to go really deep on VB, talk about the new language features and the new shell and how this all kind of fits together to build an application. So, most importantly, we want you to have fun with this stuff. I've been building applications using this technology. I love converting all my old sites, which were using ASP, to this thing. I found it much more productive. About half of my code disappeared when I did this stuff, and I find it way more productive. And we want you to go have fun with this. We want you to come party with us at SeaWorld. And finally, give us your feedback. We're super interested in having you fill out the forms, use the news groups, and as well as hold on one sec. Oh, do the news groups, and then finally, there's the beta area that I mentioned. So with that, Richard, no Richard. Okay, so we're done. Have fun and have a good day.